I've always wanted to be a musician, but I think I've got the wrong scales. Huh? Huh? Alright. What about, how does a copper dragon say goodbye? See you later. Huh? Huh? If jokes like this one are up your alley, or you find them so cringy you're considering taking psychic damage, then playing a copper dragon in your next game would be the perfect fit. These jokesters are some of the funniest and well-designed dragons around. I love all there is about them, and I even made one in a recent game of mine, where his hoard of stuff was practical joke items, like giant whoopee cushions, 1001 jokes about elves, and a rubber chicken that conjures a small, temporary black hole when squeaked. If you like powerhouse monsters that have better things to do than brawl, then you're going to love today's video. In TPK or Bust, Adult Copper Dragon. So when talking about pure offensive might, the Copper Dragon has something I would never have imagined for its prankster-like nature, and that is by far the most powerful breath attack to date I have ever seen on any dragon. The special breath attack in question is its slowing breath, which in summary says the following. In a 60-foot cone, if you fail this saving throw, you're kinda boned. Get it? You know, because you fail, you're probably dead. Jokes aside, the real power comes from the following effects. The DC is an 18 Constitution saving throw, and taking into account the CR 14, that's actually really good. Its debuff list is a mile long, starting at a creature cannot use its reactions, its speed is halved, it has no more than one attack per turn, it can only use a bonus action or a regular action, never both. This effect lasts for a minute, and yes, at the end of each of your turns, you get another saving throw. But this breath attack is just, wow, it's so devastating and powerful. It cannot be compared to something like the push breath attack, or the burst damage that the brass and blue dragons have for comparison. The first and best part that comes to mind is that there are no reactions to somebody who fails this. You can guarantee that the Copper Dragon will abuse the lack of reactions to swoop in for devastating melee combat and fly out of reach as soon and as often as possible. Even more so, it can grab and knock players prone so easily with this affliction, further restricting movements and actions while also still being able to attack. Oh, and it only gets better from here. As you can do this on a 5 to 6 recharge, you can assume it's going to get it back every 3 turns or so. But the players can only make one saving throw per round to cleanse this condition. So by the time they cleanse it, if they ever do, it might just have the breath attack again, and I'm not even done. Following that is the perfectly pesky condition, stating a player cannot spend both its action and bonus action in a round. Imagine the rogue unable to attack and then cutting action back into stealth every turn. The paladin unable to set up blinding smite before their strike. The cleric who can't cast healing word and attack at the same time. The list goes on and on. This ability is so ridiculously strong because it's literally just the 3rd level slow spell, watered down a bit and spread out in a 60-foot cone. But that slowing breath attack isn't its only offensive skill, because when characters are already debuffed, its acid breath makes for one heck of a burst option. Sitting cozy at an average 54 damage, its breath attack is identical to the Black Dragon's breath attack, but the key difference is the way it might be using it. While the Black Dragon is petty, cruel, and an ambush-based monster, the Copper Dragon takes great pride in being a social jokester, with a small craving for treasure. There is the basic Claw-Claw-Bite combo that it shares with all of its Dragonkin, dealing an average of 43 damage if you land all 3. It isn't horrible, but it settles into a average when you compare it to other dragons. You're looking at the exact same legendary actions as its other Dragonkin, with the first legendary action providing the dragon with the Detect option. Its perception being at a plus 12 is just normal, no real change there. But once again, the emphasis here is that dragons have other sight-based bonuses that make it very dependable to use this legendary action pretty often. For 2 legendary actions, its tail attack deals an average of 15 damage at 15 feet range, which again, super good follow-up for drive-by attacks, but it isn't nearly as good in my eyes as the 3 legendary action ability, which is the all-powerful wing attack, dealing good chip damage, knocking players prone on a DC 19 deck save. Nothing is different in this department, but that's not good or bad, it's just normal. So overall, when looking at this dragon, I was actually shocked to see an overwhelming might that is that slow breath. And technically speaking, a DC 18 isn't impossible, especially on a Constitution saving throw. But failing it even once means a huge difference in this fight. And because of this, and because of the acid breath, and because of the average damage it's doing with all of its other abilities, you're looking at a dragon that can burst damage, it can debuff, it can isolate, it can trap, and it can kill very, very easily. The Copper Dragon more than earns a 9.2 out of 10 in the offense category. Yes, it could use a little bit more damage on the bite or claws, but compared to the CR, not many other dragons can make its targets so helpless in combat so reliably often, like this specific dragon can. For skills, I need to mention its most interesting aspect of combat, which is its traditional disdain to flying. Where other dragons may fly very often, and for blue dragons specifically, that could be for days, the Copper Dragon loves to be on the ground, hopping and gliding to its next point of interest. And where its lair becomes more relevant is this fact itself, where it's got cramped in tight quarters on purpose. It's a huge home field advantage for dragons that are competing with the Copper Dragon. It makes it especially difficult for those dragons to siege and pull it out of its lair because of this reason. They have a deep connection to the earth, and unlike other dragons, there is a very clear-cut relationship with its lore and its connection with the earth. Inside of these dry uplands and hilltops, preferably caves and secluded places, it finds its nest. And in its nest, it gets very flavorful lair actions. The first up is the dragon points to a spot within 120 feet of itself, sprouting a 20-foot radius of stone spikes. These act like the spike growth spell. I like this ability on this dragon so very much. Once again, there is another way to slow, disable, and otherwise make the party unable to move or take certain actions, and that is just a powerful tool in its arsenal. And this is compounded with its lair having tight quarters. It makes this spell effect even more powerful. Whole hallways could be clogged by it, and even dispelling or wading through it may yield very little reward, as the dragon can easily slow breath, wing attack, or disengage to avoid any direct confrontation. The next lair action is a long one, but I'll summarize where I can. The dragon chooses a 10-foot square in an area it can see within 120 feet of it. This area is a 10-foot square of 3 feet deep mud. Any player caught in it must make a DC 15 saving throw or sink in the mud. If you sink in the mud, you are restrained. It takes an action to break free with a DC 15 strength check. Any other creature can help you on this strength check by using their action. Moving in or out of the mud costs twice as much movement, and staying there too long makes the DC 20 on the saving throw instead of 15. Now this ability gets very, very interesting with its slow breath, as the target would waste its whole turn using an action to maybe escape. And even if they do, the half movement speed by the slow breath, and then followed up by the movement reduction from getting free of the mud, makes this ability so hilariously good, I can't help but imagine all the jokes that the Copper Dragon is going to save up and use to poke fun at the party while they struggle to get out of this mud. Another interesting point here is that technically there isn't a rule against picking up a monk and throwing her into the mud if she gets too feisty or too punchy. A little mud bath never hurt anyone. Rolling right up into its stats, the Copper Dragon is running with an impressive 23 strength, 12 dexterity, 21 constitution, 18 intelligence, 15 wisdom, and a 17 charisma. The one stat that stands out the most here is that 18 intelligence, which is so shocking to see. This dragon actually competes with ancient gold dragons for intelligence. It puts up quite the stat board in all other departments, even getting above the 10 dexterity threshold I hate seeing so much on dragons. Its distribution is nigh perfect, to be honest, and when looking at it, it's so well done. Mwah, chef's kiss, 10 out of 10. It doesn't have that many stats to give out because of its CR, and because of that, it makes it even more impressive. And following that is its high intelligence is going to give it plans on plans when it comes down to combat. It's able to set traps and puzzles mid-combat to fall back on. Even when it's running or attacking, it may have another plan, a backup plan, all while having the charming wit to insult and taunt its opponent with a tongue just as sharp as its claws. Although it might not be able to capitalize on its own eyesight bonuses like other dragons, if given the opportunity, its 120 feet of dark vision and its 60-foot blind sight makes for good defensive tools when parties try to hide or cloak themselves with darkness or fog. And even without a magic spell list, its lair actions feel so in tune with its connection with the earth, I'm not even upset that it doesn't have spells. And when looking at these amazing bonuses, there isn't much else to say. The tools that it has in its arsenal are powerful, flavorful, and used to a degree of severity unseen in other dragons covered in the same way. For skills, the Copper Dragon gets the very rare score of 10 out of 10. There is a small caveat though, and it's with the CR rating. The reason I'm giving it a 10 out of 10 is actually because its CR rating is lower compared to stronger dragons like gold, blue, and red. And yet it keeps up with these kind of dragons in terms of skills, damage, tactics, and stats. It's keeping pace with a severe disadvantage on stats, proficiency, and a lack of magical spells. There is nothing this dragon needs to improve on in my eyes. Yes, it could technically have more of one thing or another. Maybe more damage, maybe more spells, maybe more resistances. But when you look at the raw sheet compared to other dragons, it has everything you could possibly need for any kind of fight. For the defense category, I'll admit that these lovely bonuses I just hyped up are faltering a little bit when assessing this next category. The Copper Dragon is a little more frail than I expected, with a very low HP pool of 184, and even worse, an 18 AC. The Copper Dragon is going to be less likely to want to face tank attacks. It could if cornered, but I don't feel as though that's very good for it. I feel like with its great movement control and so many debuffs, it's not so worried about this. But the real problem is when a party gets the drop on it, it's a really bad thing. It's in a terrible position to deal with sneak attacks or magical traps when it's caught unawares. With its high stats and good distribution, this sort of lessens the blow to its weakness of magical effects, and even more so with its natural dragon bonuses to saving throws like dexterity, constitution, wisdom, and charisma. It may not fall prone to these very often, but when it does fail a saving throw, it's going to be detrimental. Sure, it does have its 3 legendary resistances to fall back on, but it's so hard to determine how bad this is going to be for a dragon to get caught with its guard down. Now, I could talk hypotheticals all day, but if it's awake and aware of the combat around it, I don't see any of these problems being a real issue. Unless fighters and monks and rogues can get very lucky back to back with saving throws against strength, dexterity, and constitution respectively, they might never get into true melee combat. Spellcasters will struggle to deal full damage against its naturally high saving throws, and with an immunity to acid, a lot of low-level spells and cantrips that do chip damage are negated outright. With its massive intelligence, I might even make the argument that it could easily outwit a party to moving to parts of its lair mid-combat that it finds favorable every single turn, going to choke points that hits all the party with an acid breath, a ridge that the party is forced to climb to earn line of sight, only to be blown off the top of it with a sneaky wing attack, and so many other tactical advantages it can make for itself. I don't want to be biased and keep talking about hypotheticals on either side, but realizing its massive potential to avoid damage, even though it's naturally squishy, I think a score of 6.4 out of 10 is more than fair for the defensive category. Lastly is the flavor of the Copper Dragon. And the first topic I want to cover again is that more practical Joker side that it has, and why this makes fighting one of these far more hilarious and difficult to pull off. They are social, so much so that they fairly often befriend a town or city and become its protector in exchange for wine and food and conversation. They love to be a part of the world around them, and as powerful as they are, why would they make enemies with the party? And why would the party ever need to be fighting one? I can imagine a couple of very outlandish scenarios where a practical joke has gone so wrong it lands the dragon in a mess of trouble that it found just funny. I think the thing to remember is that even as a jokester or bard-like nature that these dragons have, they spew jokes and taunts all the time, even mid-combat. They have powerful debuffs, and because of this, and because of their lair, it makes them dangerous opponents to anybody that actually angers them. They have such a unique and human design, I can't help but smile at the cheesy and wonderful nature of the Copper Dragon. In terms of combat though, I want to be fair. I want to give the Copper Dragon a rating that makes the most sense. On one hand, its intelligence being so high means that it has so many jokes at its disposal. Oh yeah, it has plans too. Like, it's got so many plans. It's excused on the tactics department because it's so intelligent. It can run circles around most parties, and most plans, and most combats. It can easily improvise and adapt mid-combat. Another odd note here is that its +8 bonus to deception is both interesting and hilarious. It's able to lie about certain things and sway a conversation, or it can make up certain exaggerated insults that it finds funny. This can be massively devastating to morale and make somebody cross when attacking it. On the other hand, its social nature and its prankster-like habits could make it a lot to deal with. It can overstay its welcome, and it can easily offend a person or creature with high status with an ill-said joke. Overall, I can't see the party being sent to kill this kind of dragon very often. And even if they're tasked with the matter, it is going to be a awfully terrible fight. You can expect both physical and emotional damage every single time they go into combat with this thing, win or lose. Overall, the flavor of the Copper Dragon is kind of up in the air, but to me, it's really, really funny, and it's tactical, and it's perfect, honestly. Its lair is perfect. Its jokes are spot on and cringy enough to cause psychic damage. The overall score for flavor, in my opinion, is a very tasty 7.6 out of 10. I can see an argument for lower or higher, depending on your opinion on how this dragon actually functions, but for me personally, I can't get over it. It's a funny dragon. Finally, we get to the combined score of the Copper Dragon, and looking back on all of its, well, all-powerful abilities, effects, and skills, its tremendously impressive offensive options, its brilliant mind, the total score for this dragon is a whopping 8.3 out of 10. Landing this dragon in the certified TPK category is no surprise. I mean, that slow breath, its 18 intelligence, its super flavorful yet powerful lair actions make this dragon an overwhelming force to deal with. And if all of that wasn't enough, it's gonna make jokes at the party and call them names the entire time it's messing with them or eating them. It's a wonderful dragon that brings flavor and fun into any game. I cannot recommend a dragon more than this one right here to bring into your game as soon as possible. Just imagine the chaos and the pranks and the jokes you can do with this dragon. Oh, the fun you can have. Even if you never have it inside of combat, this dragon is funny, it's full of life, and I cannot express how much I want you to try out this dragon. Look up all the jokes you want. Go look up D&D jokes. Some of them are really good. and throw them at the party and watch them cringe and take bad pun damage every time the dragon speaks. Give the dragon a funny voice and something iconic like a mustache or a monocle, like I did for my copper dragon. Look, I had way too much fun making this video. But remember to subscribe and check out my other content around the channel. I'll see you next time with my next TPK or Bust, Adult Crystal Dragon.
If streaming games, playing D&D, talking about all things nerdy, and even embarrassing myself on live is good enough for you, well, maybe check out my content. And thanks for watching this one. I really appreciate it. If you need to find me, go ahead and look at my links down below, and maybe check out some of my other videos on TikTok and Twitch.